backbeat on the bass drum. First things we play were Freddie King songs like The Stumble, like the shuffle the fun.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and we're joined today by an absolutely divine individual, and as you can see, a multifaceted drummer, Bill Maxwell. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Happy to finally see you in person. Good to be here.
It's good to see your face, brother. You know, I want you to talk about this cat, Roger Dollarhide, because I know that like guys like Jeremy Steig, Mike Mayneri, these guys were looping. They were cutting analog tape back in the '60s and looping it. And Steig was showing these multicolored visuals. It was sort of early light projection stuff. That's one kind of looping. Okay, but in '78, this cat was looping your drum beats. Can you talk about this? Because that was way ahead of what I never thought that looping was going on at that time in that way.
Yeah, Roger. I met Roger at Paramount Recording Studio, which it's not affiliated with Paramount Pictures. It's on Santa Monica and Vine. It's an old recording studio. It was owned by Brian Bruderlin, who's James Brolin's brother. James Brolin's real name is James Bruderlin. And Roger was a kind of a house engineer or a guy that kept the rooms working then, and he was producing Sly Stone. And I don't even remember what came out. I think the album came out, but I went up and was hanging with him, and he showed me some stuff like, well, we wanted a harp on this album, but we didn't have the money, so he found a harp, and he put it in a loop of a harp, and he VSO'd it and got it in tune, and he would throw it in, loop it into different parts of the songs, which is what sampling is now. But Roger was doing
sampling. That's what the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
At the time, were they using vernacular for it? It was brand new.
No, it's just called making a loop.
Making a loop. And Dollarhide was the
Dollarhide had all these loops strung out around there, and he would, he had a certain length of tape, and so if it was a certain chord, he'd have a round tape, and it would go around the circle, and then he would just use a VSO, which is a variable speed oscillator, to change the tone until he would get it to be the chord that he needed, and then he would record that onto his multitrack. He'd hit the multitrack and then hit that just at the right time, and if it wasn't right, he'd back it up and try it again, and he would get these loops and would put them on. And I think the Beatles were doing that too. I read something McCartney said on one of their songs they had a bunch of little tiny loops on a 2-track machine.
Really? You mean at Abbey Road?
Yeah, one of their early records like Revolver, or there's an article McCartney talks about all these little tiny loops that they had. But Dollarhide's the first guy I saw doing it.
And then it was for a Sly album that you were doing,
no,
or
I
just
doing it. He was doing it. I was just hanging. I was doing something else downstairs in the big room, and then I met him, and then I did some work for a Motown producer named Hal Davis, I think.
Still trying to look for that cat.
He produced a lot of the Jackson 5. And so Hal Davis had Roger, and they would just say, okay, play this beat, whatever the beat was, you done that, just play it for 24 bars or 32 bars. Okay, play another beat. And he'd do it with a click. And I had David Williams, who was Michael Jackson's guitarist, he would play
Billie
along.
Jean.
Yeah, and he would play along. And then they would take these beats and loop them and turn them into songs later. And Dollarhide was the one who was in there doing that. And that was the first time I'd seen it. This was, it could have been 78.
That was so revelatory. But this is why I wanted to talk to Bill Maxwell today, because this is my entire show is a spiritual journey, and you talked to me very eloquently in part 2 about the key to love on the bandstand is submitting to the song, truly submitting to the tune. And you have to love the song. You have to love it, right? But what if you don't love I was thinking about it on the way over. I said, well, what if you really are not into the music? I mean, there's a fine line. How do you can't force love.
No, you can't. There's certain songs, look, I maybe don't love them, but I find something in it that's pretty and beautiful.
Beautiful.
I find something to care about within it, whether it's the bass line or the words, or I try to find something that I can concentrate on to put my spirit into it to make it better, as opposed to just like, oh, please, I'm playing the same old beat. See, I don't really listen to drums when I play drums. I don't even think about the drums. I listen to the song, and I listen to the band and the bass and the words.
You just said something profound. No in-ear monitors for you.
No.
You don't listen to yourself.
Not really.
Why?
I'm not thinking about that.
Okay, but that you just delineated between my generation and younger generations, the perseveration of needing to know how we sound versus dynamics. Because that's what I was listening back to my interview with him. He's like, here's some advice for drummers. Don't wear in-ear monitors.
Yeah, no, I don't wear those. And if I have monitors, I usually have to have monitors. I don't like them very loud. And I really genuinely don't want any of me in them, unless it's just, if I'm playing my bass drum too hard to hear myself, then maybe I'll have a little bit of bass drum just so I don't play it too hard. But I don't really generally care about any drums in my monitor. I want to hear the vocal, I want to hear the chords, and I want to hear the bass, and I want to hear everything. But the least amount is me.
Is there, I mean, we're going back into the bag of one of the most iconic studio drummers here, but is there a tune that you were not feeling that much, but then you were able to peel off on something beautiful on it that you can talk about where you could groove the tune?
I don't remember, Jake. You know, so many of these things, you do a session and it's a 3-hour session and you don't hear it again, and then maybe you do, and they just. Look, every one of these things are, when you're doing a session, there's something difficult that you have to figure out. If you're doing it right, you have to figure something out. You just don't go in I don't just go in and walk through it. I try to find something, what can make the song better, what can make the verse be different from the chorus to the bridge, and what should I play here, and what would happen with the bass, and should it be floaty, or should it be more rhythmic and driven? And so I try to find the challenges, and that comes from the song. The song presents itself, and that's why I love the song. You know, I try to submit to that.
The most divine story I've heard in 1,500 interviews is when you were coming off the road with Barefoot Jerry. You had quit, the band fell apart. You were not in great shape, in many ways.
Playing terrible, yeah.
And were you still hooked on junk, or you?
I never did junk.
But you were just
I was just kind of lost.
I know, I dig, man.
I just stayed high all day and all night, and just played whatever I wanted to play. And I was a selfish drummer at that point. I didn't, at that point I hadn't learned some of the things I've learned.
What had you? So the sort of ego was involved, and then you combine that with the substance abuse, and it was not going well.
It wasn't going well, and I don't know if it's as much ego. It's just I was just going to do what I wanted to do. Stubborn.
You come back, and did Hadley say, "I want you to come to the church"? Or how did that work?
I don't know directly. I remember Hadley. I'd been in Las Vegas, and I ran into a bass player named Bob Magnuson.
Are you kidding me? Legendary cat, dude. People want you to speak louder. They want to hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob Magnuson.
Bob.
Was an excellent bass player, and I can't remember the keyboard players, Mike Green, I think, and we would jam and play like Joe Zawinul songs, and I made some recordings of it, 2-track recordings, and I wanted to play them for Hadley. And so Hadley said, "I'll listen if you listen to my stuff." And I said, "Sure." I played what we've been doing, and then he started playing me messages from his church, which I wanted to get out of there as quick as I could because it was the most boring stuff I ever heard to me at that point. So I played him the music, and he played me the little guy preaching at the church, Jimmy Hill, and it was the Open Door Mission. Then after that, I moved to Nashville, and I don't know where we were. I don't know if Hadley directly invited me, but when I came back from Nashville and I ran into the saxophone player from the Third Avenue Blues Band, Bob Beasley, and he said, "What are you doing back in Oklahoma? I thought you lived in Nashville." I said, "No, I just decided to come back." And he said, "Yeah, well, I ran into Hadley the other day, and he said you were going to come start playing with him down at the Open Door Mission." And I said, "Really? Maybe I will." And that's kind of what happened. I went down there and started playing with Hadley, and then we went and talked to Harlan Rogers, who was the keyboard player in the Third Avenue Blues Band, and he was going through some rough times, and we prayed with him, and Harlan decided to quit the band and come join us at the Mission. And then after that, it was when the story I told you where we talked to Fletch Wiley, who was had been using heroin, was hooked, and he was delivered after we prayed for him with no withdrawal, which kind of just let us know this is a lot bigger than us, and we don't know what we're doing, but we decided that we were going to try to help people because we'd gotten some help.
You consider that Hadley Hawkinsmith saved your life?
I consider that Hadley Hawkinsmith was a big part of it.
Because he was playing you these preacher things that you were like tuning out, but then
it was something that touched my heart. It was something bigger than Hadley.
Yeah.
But
he was a conduit for it.
Yeah, but I owe tremendous debt to Hadley. Hadley's a very kind person, and I've been making music with Hadley since I was 16. and making music with Harlan Rogers since I was 14. And so that's a long time.
Now you open your hearts and play for free for all the street people, the peeps, the people that are hurting, and God knows there's a lot of people hurting. But then Andraé Crouch, how did he come into the mix?
Well, we were doing that, and we had to take day jobs. And then one of the jobs I did was to go out and try to plant trees, and I was the world's worst tree planter.
And that's a heavy gig,
Man,
heavy gig.
Terrible at it. And so then a friend of mine offered me a job, Johnny Johnson, who used to be one of my drum teachers. Great drummer, great friend. That I could work for him at Long John Silver's Fish and Chips. So I was trying to cook fish in the fish and chips, but the grease kept burning my hand. I was terrible at that. And there was a keyboard player, organ player in Oklahoma City, and Wally Brown said, well, why don't you come play with me at Shotgun Sam's Pizza Parlor? I'll give you $15 a night, $20 a night. So I started doing that just to get some income so we could still do what we were doing.
What your purpose was, yeah.
And we started writing songs. And I would say, some of the birth of early Christian music, gospel music. And Andraé Crouch heard about us from, several different people, but he came into Oklahoma City and was doing a concert, and we went to see him, and he said, I've been hearing about you guys. I'd love to hear your music. And we said, well, come on down to the Mission. So after his concert, we took him to the Mission, and we played him all the songs we've been writing. And he immediately said, you guys got to become my band. I want you to be my band. And, I just went on back and forth.
Hold on, who was the cat that found you at Fish and Chips and said, come to the pizza parlor? Who was that?
Well, the guy at Fish and Chips, his name was Wally Brown.
But you didn't start writing with him. You started writing with Hadley and...
No, it was Hadley and Harlan. Really, Hadley and Harlan did most of the writing.
I mean, can you... you're being very modest. I mean, you were cooking the groove. And when you talk about modern, contemporary, or Christian music, it still swung really hard.
Well, I wouldn't think, we didn't have any relatable, I didn't listen to gospel music. People say, oh, you're such a great gospel drummer. I grew up listening to Elvin Jones and Bernard Purdy and
Max Roach.
Tony Williams, and came from that. Bobby Bland's drummer.
Clyde Stubblefield.
Jabbo.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I came from that. But I learned that language, playing with Billy Preston and playing with Andraé. I learned what that was and tried to get to the heart of it, what the feeling of that music was. But no, I didn't come up in gospel music, and none of us did. So we just wrote songs, and because the music was still modern music, it just was a gospel lyrics. And that's what Andraé wanted. Andraé was like, he wanted to break free of what he was doing and kind of bend it towards more modern music. Because Andraé said, I don't think there's any right or wrong kind of music except bad music. I just think that the message is what's different. So I'll put my message to any kind of music. And he wanted us for that.
Did he let you basically work it out yourselves? I mean, he didn't micromanage the groove so much?
No. We would just play the songs as best. He would, he's a prolific writer. He'd play them, and we'd try to figure out what to do, and he usually liked it. And he had a record company executive producer who had produced his records, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't tell this, but since I'm alive, I will. He done a live album at Carnegie Hall.
Right, I know that one, yeah.
And he wasn't happy with it, and he wasn't going to put it out. And they spent a lot of money in doing it, and he said, I want Bill to replace the drums, and I want Harlan to play organ, and I want Hadley to play guitar. And so they had recorded it with a helping still pickup, which is a direct pickup on the piano, so that it didn't have any leakage. The piano was isolated. André's vocal mic was isolated. There was leakage in the background vocals. So we redid all the background vocals. We kept all André's vocal, his piano, and I went first. I listened to Andraé and I'd play with him. Even if it sped up or if it slowed down or if the drummer was off, I'd get off and I'd try to make it as good as I could. I did that. Then Hadley replaced the bass. Then Hadley put on guitars. Then Harlan played organ. Fletch played some flute lines. And the background singer sang it again. And it came out and it was André's biggest album. And everyone swore they saw me at Carnegie Hall. And that's exactly the way it sounded.
Wait, you were not there. Okay, so this is phenomenal. So
not that time. I was there later with him, but not on that album.
Oh my God!
It was overdubbed. So that the record company didn't trust Andraé so much they wouldn't give him the master. They made a copy of the master because they figured he would mess it up. And I went with him, and it was an engineer named Eddie Brackett, and I hung out, and I started learning the production things, and Andre liked working with me. So when the next album we did was Take Me Back, and he made me a co-producer with him, and that was his biggest album to date, and that won a Grammy. That's where Fred Tackett and Dean Parks and David Hungate and those guys, my friends, came in and started playing, Joe Sample, and so that was, you know, that's what kind of progression. Hadley and Harlan left and moved back to Oklahoma. They didn't like it anymore, and Fletch moved back to Texas, but he would still travel, and I just stuck it out.
You on the road with how often was Andre, you know, cognizant of either wanting to play the song the same way off the album, or did you always play a little bit different?
Always different. Now, the albums were kind of, you know, big productions.
Some of them were so freaking burning. There's one of you guys outside a big barn, you know, there's on Muir, and it's the most funky, swinging gospel album I've ever heard in my life. Joe Sample's on it, Wilton's on it. But I guess more to the point, I mean, is there a way to, not that you came from gospel, but what was the rhythm, how did you change the rhythm of contemporary Christian music?
I don't know. I just played like me.
Can you play a little bit? People want you.
Not really, not without the song. You know,
Right.
Jake, I'm really song oriented as a drummer. I don't even, and at my age now, I'm gotten to where I don't even like drums without bass or something. If people wants to come play with me, that'd be different. But I have to have something else to feel off of.
Well, you did a heck of a job opening up. Do you play around the vocals? I mean, this is another thing Purdy talked about.
Oh yeah, I want to be aware of the melody. I want to know where it's going because I don't want to interfere with it. But if it needs a lift, I want to be there to give it a lift. I want to work with, and there's no rules about it. But that's why when the machines came in and it's like the beat's here and you do whatever you want, that threw me because that's just the opposite of the way I think. I don't think, just give me the beat and I'll just stay with it for 4 minutes and then you do anything you want to and we can have all these same beats. I move with the song. You know, when I played with Ray Charles one time, somebody said, do you want to use a click? And Ray said, play with me and it'll feel good. We don't use a click.
Exactly.
And I played with Ray and it felt good.
Oh.
And I'll just play with him. And it was easy because he gives you the thing with his body and his hands.
Was it in the studio or is it a live?
It was a studio for a live TV show with Glenn Campbell's the host of. And so I learned from that why does every bar have to be exactly the same tempo? What's the rule in that? I can do that. I can play with a click and stay with it, but some bars need to feel a little different than other bars. It makes the music breathe more.
With the TV show Martin you did?
Yeah.
And you were also working with major hip hoppers like Biggie and Snoop Dogg and
When
those.
they were on the show, yeah, I try to just do whatever they needed.
That's the point, is that you were doing it. I mean, obviously it was a good paycheck. What was your individual stamp in creating any of that music? Because to me, it was all processed music. It was
good for me. I worked with some very good programmers.
Programmers.
Yeah,
but not musicians.
Well, I mean, they play a bit, but that's what they did. They programmed, and I understood it. I got into it, but I got tired of being in a room for 10 hours, 12 hours with machines, putting together all these sounds and loops and the hip hop things, and then feeling like, where's everybody else? I didn't ever start playing music to be in here by myself. Certain guys like to be by themselves. I don't. I like being in bands. I started playing in bands, so after I finished the TV shows of doing that, I just decided I was just going to play in my bands.
Right. I mean, it's a fascinating. I mean, what can you say about some of those? I mean, it's not really my bag, but those hip hoppers. What do they like as far as the drum groove is concerned? I mean, in terms of
it all changes, but like I say when Biggie Smalls was on. They couldn't afford his master. They wanted a ridiculous amount of money to play his master. He was going to rap live to it, and they said, "Can you remake his master?" And let me hear it. Yeah, I could do it. It was actually pretty easy, so I just copied it, and he thought it was his record. He said, "Oh, that's my record now." He didn't know it wasn't his track, so I thought that was funny. Lou Pardini helped me on that.
Lou Pardini, I cannot. My buddy Dan Horn just hit me. Pardini's playing tonight with this cat. I cannot. It's
Pardini's in Nashville.
Right, no, but he's playing tonight live here with this
No, he's in Nashville.
right now, currently.
Yeah, I just came from there.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, like, can you talk a little bit about the studio we're in right now with Pee Wee Hill, and,
Yeah,
and how'd you connect with Pee Wee?
I met Pee Wee, I don't even remember exactly. I think I met Pee Wee through Abraham Laboriel and Chester Thompson.
The drummer Chester Thompson,
Yeah,
yeah, not the B3 player.
Yeah, and the B3 player is from Oklahoma City. He was,
Dude, everybody is from Oak City. Just
Tulsa people would disagree. But-
Kellner, Karstein, those guys. You know,
I
but is
met
that
Pee
bread
Wee around
basket?
through Abraham and Chester and Alex Acuna, and we were all going to the same church, and we had a band with the keyboard players were Michael O'Mardian,
Oh my God.
Greg Filling Gaines, and Pee Wee's wife Michiko was outstanding. The bass players were Abraham and Pee Wee.
What church was it?
It was called the Church on the Way. John Patitucci was the other bass player, and then we had on the drummer percussionist. They had Alex Acuna, Chester Thompson, and me, and probably more. I mean, there were so many.
Was Pee Wee on bass, or that's?
Pee Wee was one of the bass players. You know, we'd all switch off and do. And then Rose Stone, Sly's younger sister, who sang the female leads on all the Sly and Family Stone hits, started a gospel choir at the church, and it was about Pee Wee. How many people we have in that choir?
I think there's 100 and something.
Yeah, it was about 100 people.
Whoa.
And she trained people to sing, and great singers came out of that, including Pee Wee and Michiko's daughter Judith. And they asked me to play in it, so I played in that, and Pee Wee and Michiko played guitar. I played keyboards, and Paul Jackson Jr. played guitar.
Wow.
And then Ronnie Van took over. And then that's where I really started working with Pee Wee more, and with Michiko was in Rose's choir, which was great fun. And what was incredible was to see her teach these kids to sing and how good they sounded.
Why were you allowed to be on the bandstand at 13 years old?
Well,
Mike Clark was on the bandstand doing R&B gigs in Texas. I mean, what I'm saying is this is the apprenticeship that's no longer here.
it's not here. I didn't start playing clubs till I was 14. I was traveling with Jesse Ed Davis at 13.
At 13, you were traveling with him.
And 14. Well, on the weekends, I was raised by my grandparents, and they recognized I had a talent.
Can I ask you a question? Why, was it just tradition that your father wouldn't be involved in your life, or like?
No, my mother died when I was 2.
I know, but your dad was still
My
around.
father died when I was 10. So my grandparents essentially took me
They said you're okay. Go on the road
on the weekends.
on the weekend.
And
Dick.
it was supervised, and I played at the. Gosh, I can't think of it. Rockwood Club, I think it was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which was where Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks played in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And so I played there on weekends with Jesse Ed's
Oh
band.
my God! So you saw Richard Manuel and those cats down there.
I saw them in Oklahoma City with Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks.
So sick.
And then they left Ronnie and they started touring. They came to Oklahoma City and played the Onyx Club where I was playing. They came in for 2 or 3 nights and we took off. They were great.
What I guess to the cats out there who have not yet been road dogging it, haven't had an opportunity to go on tour, what is one thing that you learned from that experience with Jesse Ed at that time that still flutters in and out of your consciousness to this day?
Make the songs feel good and keep those people happy. You know, we were playing fraternity and sorority parties, and they were dancing and drunk, and I had to keep a beat and make them feel good. And we wanted them to have a good time, and so I had to play. You know, they do. You know, you made me want to shout. Come on, come on. I had to do that and nail that, and all those things. Everything had to feel great for the people. If the dancers didn't like you, you were out of business. So I learned right there, get the people on the dance floor, make the groove intense.
And like, were you allowed to play through the time, or they get upset with you? They say, "Dummy, just play the groove." Or
I was always me, which would I go over the top, and they'd say, "Settle down, young fella." Of course, I was always taking it a little further than what it should have been, but that was me trying to learn.
Before I let you go, I just want you to talk as articulately as you can about. I think you quoted George Washington about the true measure of a man is service.
George Washington Carver.
Thank you. Can you explain your own doctrine as it relates to what is true service? What is being a true disciple of the divine?
Well, I think for me, it's to not think about myself first, to actually be more concerned about you or somebody else I meet. My wife and I just took a little road trip through the South where my family's from. My grandfather was from Tennessee, my grandmother was from Alabama, and we went through there. And one of the things we prayed was, if we run into anybody that needs help, let us be able to help them, or if there's something we could do to encourage somebody to do that, and not just be thinking about ourselves and what fun we're going to have, and to try to be polite, try to be nice, and try to listen, pay attention, and be kind. Obviously, you hear a lot about Christianity and these dogmatic, hard right-wing Republicans who don't seem to have compassion. I'm not that. We're people who care, and my wife feels the same way. And if you talk to Pee-wee, he's the same way. We have people that seem to come into our lives. I'll tell you a quick story.
Go ahead.
There's an album cover called "Take Me Back," and it was shot in front of an old country church.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was my grandfather's church in Athens, Tennessee. And so I found that church again with my wife. I wanted to take some pictures. It looks exactly the same. It's a little tiny cemetery. It's a dead church. It's a little tiny road outside of Athens. And we were getting ready to leave, and I said to my wife, I said, "Did you take any pictures of the cemetery?" She said, "No." "Let me look. Can you take a couple?" She's a better photographer than me. She got out. Just as she did, a man pulled up, and he was putting some flowers on his wife's grave. And she had just died of cancer a few months before, and they'd been married for over 40 years. And he was devastated. And she told him my story, that this was my grandfather's church, and I'd gone there in the 50s. And we used it for an album cover, and kind of had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Well, would you like to come inside this church?" I said, "Sure, you got a key?" And he said, "Yeah, I do some part-time maintenance." And he took us inside. They had the same pump organ that was in the church in the 50s. I went over and tried to play it, and the piano and the pews were the same. And he was looking, pretty gloomy. And we said, "Can we pray with you?" And we prayed with him about his wife and about his life, because he was lonesome. He didn't have any, his kids were gone, and it was like just a breakthrough. He started crying, but a power of peace, compassion came over this man, and we felt like we made a friend, and it maybe helped him with his day. And so that was just, we asked for that every day. If we could run into somebody that could encourage them. Met another woman who's a waitress, and she from Venezuela. She had to leave her mother and her daughter behind in Venezuela, and she didn't speak English, and she was with her sister. And I took her address, her email address, sent her some videos, and she's been corresponding. Just to, that's to me what my life's about, more than getting up on a bandstand and showing off. It's about trying to be a blessing to somebody.
When you look at people that call themselves Christians, do you reach a point? I'm just asking you to speculate, because you're not this kind of person, but the people that are so rigid and dogmatic, and there are these tenets that you have to follow in order to be a good Christian, and then you wind up seeing them selling their soul for power, for connections, for greed. Do they reach a certain point in your mind where they've passed a Rubicon and they no longer can look in the mirror? Can those cats truly look in the mirror?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know, but
I just feel like I'm a substitute, not doing my thing, but with what's happening, I'm pouring my heart and soul out in these, doing my best, and knowing that these people who consider themselves good Christian people, they're not interested truly in facts. And they also realize that when they go back to their home, as if a broken home with a substitute teacher teaching kids at a failing school, their constituents are so mired in grief that they are raging. They're not interested in the truth. So to me, it's just to know you and to know what you stand for is incredibly important for our society in this time right now, because to me, dogmatic religion, I don't care if it's Judaism or Catholicism or Islam, a lot of it's become perverted. To me, it is about service, and that word, I don't think you can have you can have as many definitions as you want for service. But it certainly is not, at a certain point, you got to think, still be able to have an independent. How did you stay independent thinking even when you became a Christian?
I tried to, look, being a Christian to me is having a relationship with God, and it's being able to talk to Him and to listen, to pray, and to be guided. And if you follow a lot of the words of Jesus, Jesus said, you will love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and you will prefer others. And if someone asks you for your hat, give them your jacket, give them more, do more. I have to follow that. If they're not following that, they're not following the same thing as I'm following. If I read the Gospels and read what He said, I don't live up to it. I made a ton of mistakes, but I believe this with all my heart, and I try very hard to represent what I believe as well as I can. Because and there's no anger, there's no hatred. I try to get
No judgment either.
No, get that out of me. Look, I judge me first. I'm the worst. I've done all kinds of things, but I try to be better, and that's what it is for me. We're all broken people. Every one of us has things in our life that are broken, and we wish we hadn't have done. They've gone through, and we feel guilty, and we have this pressure. And to actually say that I can be forgiven, and I can forgive other people, that's a blessing for me, because I came from a family that didn't forgive easily and didn't forget.
Yeah, well, Bill Maxwell, thank you for shedding light. People were loving this. You are a mentor and a hero to so many people, man. Thank you for taking the time, man.
Thank you, Jake. I wish it was more drums, but catch me with the band next time.
I didn't. That beginning was brilliant, dude. Keep kicking butt. See you later.
Thank you, Jake.
Later on.